The first session of China's 14th National People's Congress is underway in Beijing as delegates review government reports and choose who will lead the country for the next half-decade. Delegates set up an annual GDP growth target of around 5% for the country, after it grew by just 3% last year, the lowest in decades. Also on the itinerary is the nation's defense spending and how to navigate Taiwan. Former Australian Prime Minister Kevin Rudd joins me now. He is currently president and CEO of the Asia Society. So, Kevin, what is the purpose of the Congress and what do you make of this particular one?
Every 5 years, they hold these huge events, National People's Congresses, which is the formal mechanism they use to appoint the president, the prime minister or the premier, and the vice premiers. And that's going to come in a few days' time, but we all know what the result will be. So that's the formal reason. But the second, more substantive one, which interests all of those of us who try to analyse what's going on in China, is that the outgoing premier delivers what's called the government work report. And it's one of those big signposts to the year ahead as to where the Communist Party leadership is putting its priorities for 2023.
And so looking, where do you think the priorities are? And what does the 5% GDP number mean to you, given what China has been through with the zero COVID policy? How do you read what you've seen so far?
Well, if you look carefully at the text of the report and some of the surrounding comments by Xi Jinping himself, I think it's about two things. On the economic agenda, which you've just referred to, it's saying that our priority for 2023 is, in three words, growth, growth and growth, because 2022 was bad, bad and bad. And so the official number for last year was only something in the order of 3%. Most of us in the analytical community think it was closer to a big fat zero. That's when you had zero COVID and lockdowns and the rest. So the growth target of 5% is designed to turn the economy around. If you look at the instruments, what he's pointing to is we need to get private consumption back into harness, which is possible because zero COVID no longer applies. He wants to get the private sector back investing, more problematic because they've lost confidence in recent years. And he wants a big state-owned enterprise sector as well, particularly in the new areas of science, technology and innovation. They're his growth drivers.
Let me grab onto that science and technology, because connect that with U.S. sanctions that the Biden administration has been rather aggressive with on chips, on high technology. They even put some new sanctions on today. How much is that a reaction to that, and how do you see that competition?
Well, actually, there's two bits to it. Xi Jinping began a national science, technology, innovation, self-sufficiency drive back in 2015. Even before Donald Trump's trade war, even before Joe Biden was heard of, at least as being the President of the United States. So that was part of the existing track of what I'd describe as China's economic nationalism. But if you look carefully at the text of what Xi has said in the last couple of days, he said, we in the future have to be absolutely clear about two things: providing for our national self-sufficiency in food and agriculture, and providing for our national self-sufficiency in manufacturing, science and technology. And he said, because we cannot in the future rely upon international market supply. And what he's saying is there's going to be more of where this has come from in the United States by way of trade, export and other sanctions.
What's your assessment, Kevin, of Taiwan, which produces a great deal of semiconductors in the world, and China's frustration at the moment and this desire to produce more? Does that make Taiwan a more attractive military target for China?
I don't believe so, because if you think it through, and we're looking at TSMC, the Taiwan Semiconductor Corporation, which makes the best, sharpest, fastest, most energy-efficient semiconductors in the world. In fact, 93% of the supply, ironically, just offshore from the PRC.
Right.
But if the Chinese were to walk in tomorrow, I think we can assume that our friends in Taiwan would have already worked out how to rip out the IP and get it somewhere else safe fairly quickly. In other words, the keys to the kingdom will quickly be transferred elsewhere. I think their Taiwan policy in China is driven by other things. And the other interesting thing about this National People's Congress is the second big emphasis, which is on national security. You see a defence budget, even in the official papers, projected to increase by 7.8%, and lots of warnings about what Xi Jinping and Li Keqiang, the premier, describe as China's worsening external strategic environment and what he said today, this is Xi Jinping, about America's policy of containment of China.
Yeah.
So that's what's driving their views of their relationship with the US. But I think they'll be in the process, would have been in the process of boosting their defence expenditure anyway.
I want to ask you a short question, but a complicated one. You wrote a book called The Avoidable War, The Dangers of a Catastrophic Conflict Between the U.S. and Xi Jinping's China. In your view, is that becoming better or worse, that conflict?
When I first began this, way back when, 40 years ago, looking at this as a young diplomat in Beijing, we would have regarded this as a 1 or 2 out of 10 possibility over Taiwan. It's nudging up. And if you look
What's the number now?
Well, not yet 4 or 5, but heading in this direction,
Okay.
which is why many of us in the analytical community are concerned. Chinese military preparedness and also the changing pattern of China's political rhetoric on the question of Taiwan, and Xi saying, we've got to fix the unity question by mid-century.
All right, Kevin Rudd, thank you so much for being with us.